This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Here we go again. We really can't get a break from these two, and I truly believe that Harry and Meghan just want to exhaust everybody. They don't care about the damage that they're causing, and they don't care that they're getting railed on right now for being the biggest online bullies. Today, Prince Harry's at it again, saturating the media with now Travelist and announcing their 5-year milestone report.
We're now just 5 years away from the 2030 deadline for the Sustainable Development Goals, the global blueprint for creating a more resilient planet and quite literally saving ourselves. But it's quite clear we're not progressing as quickly as needed, and the economic impacts are only growing. These realities leave us with a choice: find practical solutions to climate change, or accept the massive financial and human losses that it's causing. I think we all agree that the latter isn't the answer. Travel can do a tremendous amount of good. It connects us to the destinations we love and to the communities that call these places home. It drives economic growth, creates jobs, and when done well, can protect the people, wildlife, and environment that we all share. And when we started Travelist 6 years ago, the goal was simple. I wanted to harness travel's power and potential to help create a more resilient world. And I'm proud of what we've accomplished. We've been the first and only independent organization to mobilize competing tech and travel companies who see the business sense in sustainability. We're aggregating essential data to help drive more targeted interventions from policymakers and investors. Together, we're bringing sustainable solutions to the mainstream, providing travelers with clear information that helps them make better and more informed choices, which is what we know consumers want. We were one of the founding signatories of the Glasgow Declaration, which created the first concrete sustainability targets for our industry. We participated in global conferences, including COP29 in Baku, and we will continue this work at COP30 in Belém this year. We've worked directly with destinations and local businesses to learn how we can help them on their sustainability journey. And while we've made real progress, there's still much more to be done to protect the people and places that we all depend on. Now, our new report outlines the unique role we believe Travelist can play at this crucial phase, and we'd love for you to join us on this journey.
Now, it's my belief that this video, too, is also AI generated, like the other one that he and Meghan did for the UN ministerial. Something tells me that it might be the UN that is backing Harry because he is so gung-ho about these so-called SDG goals and meeting this Agenda 2030. Being that we know that the video with Meghan is artificially generated, I have no doubt that the one with Harry is also artificially generated. When you look at his hairline closer and you watch the video, you can see the hairs start to sort of, I want to say, move or sort of, blur out and come back in. And it just seems quite odd, in my opinion. But anyway, Prince Harry is back to virtue signal to the world again on how we should think about traveling and making accommodations to now save the planet. Now, for those that haven't been watching me for a while, or for those that have been but didn't see this video, I think it's a good time to put back talking about Travelist and what their business really is about. And it will give you a perspective as to, this is not about saving the planet. We all know that this is all about making money, and Travelist really is a data farm. In my opinion, this is just another scam, like everything else Harry and Meghan have been involved with. As we have discussed before, Harry and Meghan represent the worst kind of people on this earth, which are these elitist parasites. I think it's a blessing that Meghan is this so-called nouveau riche, because what we see is really the grift of all these wealthy people who have amassed this ungodly amount of money and how they obtain it, in which it is exploiting off the backs of the middle class. And what we're seeing with these man-made crises going on at this moment, Meghan and Harry have had their hand in every single one of them. But thanks to us Megxit watchers and those that have called out the BS of their grift, we honestly now get to see the bigger picture of the people that are at play doing this to everyone. So I think it is good that they are opening our eyes to what the wealthy have been doing to the poor middle class and squeezing us and stealing our money so they can line their pockets. But it's also interesting to watch how people are waking up and stopping it. So I do think that there is hope for us, but we have to keep talking about it. And today I want to talk about something called greenwashing and how it relates to Meghan and Harry. Of course, all these various problems that we are seeing happen now with the environment is a result of these elitists pushing us in a direction to where they want in order to profit. So let's take a look at greenwashing and how Meghan and Harry also have their hands in this. So, the actual definition of greenwashing is the act or practice of making a product, policy, activity, etc., appear to be more environmentally friendly or less environmentally damaging than it really is. It's actually an unethical practice where companies mislead consumers by claiming to be so called environmentally friendly or sustainable. And with this whole push for climate change and getting governments on board to also push that by pushing regulations, we're starting to see consumers change their consumption habits to reduce their environmental impact. And what we're seeing as part of the grift is that companies now have a financial incentive to be more environmentally responsible. What it boils down to, as like the CEO of BlackRock says, Larry Fink, that they are the ones who drive behavior. So there are many types of greenwashing. One of the most relevant ones that you would recognize is called green labeling, which is a tactic whereby a business is calling something green or sustainable, but a closer examination at it reveals that their words are misleading. Other phases of greenwashing include greenhushing, which is a deliberate form of underreporting used to conceal a company's genuine sustainability situation. By downplaying their environmental impact, companies may attempt to create a false impression of being more sustainable than they truly are. We could also say that about countries like China. Then there is green rinsing, which is the practice of changing targets or goals before achieving them. This tactic can create the illusion of progress without actually implementing any significant changes. Now, the next one, green shifting, I think could be applied to the World Economic Forum members, in which deflecting attention from their own environmental impact by suggesting that the responsibility for sustainability lies with consumers changing their behavior. A great example is this shift and forcing us into eating this bioengineered food, as well as eating bugs pushed into these 15-minute cities. If you notice, all of these are transformative industries that are now up and coming that people are investing in. So what are they doing? Creating this man-made crisis to say, no, we really need to come together for the planet and for the future and do this together. But meanwhile, you have these globalists who are doing the exact opposite. And we clearly see that with Meghan and Harry. Now, this last phase of greenwashing is one that we're going to focus on in today's video. And green crowding means when organizations come together as a collective to drive change, but then make minimal headway. This might make them look like they are taking responsibility, but progress is slow and lacks significance. Anyone think of a business endeavor that Meghan and Harry have been on that may appear like a green crowding? If you've guessed Travelist, then you are right. A little fun fact that may show up on Jeopardy one day is that the Travelist website is made by the same people who made the Sussex.com website as well as the Archwell.com, and I believe the TIG as well. So you know Meghan's sticky little fingers are all over this. So last year, Travelist had made this announcement that MasterCard and Sabre now have joined the Travelist Coalition. This was quietly announced with not much fanfare, and I wonder if that was done on purpose, because the negative attention that Harry was getting for losing his security case would have probably backlashed onto this announcement with calling Harry a hypocrite because he flies private everywhere. So, in efforts to not soil the relationship between MasterCard and Sabre in this coalition, I think that they announced this on the down low as a result of probably the backlash that would have came had they made it so public like they have done in the past with everything else. And this is just another example, like Santa Bali, where Harry and Meghan's brand is so so toxic that major corporations don't want to be associated with them. And this is what the press release says. February 29th out of London. Travelus, the not-for-profit organization founded by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, today welcomes MasterCard and Sabre to its coalition. I'm going to pause right there. So this not-for-profit organization is not the same as a charity organization. Many people are saying, Travelus is not listed as a charity in the UK Charity Commission, and that's true. It's not. Apparently, there is a difference between not-for-profit and charity definitions within the United Kingdom. It's not the same over here. Like if you call an organization a not-for-profit, it is either considered a foundation or a charity, which is entitled to certain tax relief. But I'm going to get into this a little bit more in just a minute. Let me continue this. MasterCard and Sabre join other leading travel and technology brands in the Travelus Coalition, including Amadeus, Booking.com, Expedia Group, Google Skyscanner, Travelport, Trip.com Group, TripAdvisor, and Visa. The group, which represents a combined market cap of almost $3 trillion, aims to bring sustainability information to the mainstream to help people make better travel choices. The addition of MasterCard and Sabre will help accelerate that ambition. MasterCard is a global technology company in the payments industry, with a mission of powering an inclusive digital economy where both people and planet prosper. Using secure data and networks, partnerships, and passion, MasterCard is focused on partnering across the public, private, and social sectors to drive new solutions that combat climate change. Sabre is a leading technology provider to the travel industry, specializing in delivering modern retailing, distribution, and fulfillment technology for airlines, hoteliers, agencies, and other travel partners around the globe. Sabre is committed to building towards a better tomorrow, enabling responsible travel choices for all. So there's good and bad with Harry being attached to this company. And what I mean by the good part is that we know that Harry is a manipulative liar in which everything that he has done so far in his endeavors has been about exploiting others. This should be no different, hence the reason why we're able to look at this a little bit closer to realize that the agenda is not really what it seems on the surface. And the reason why I bring up this greenwashing is because this is a prime example of greenwashing in our face. According to them, based off of whatever bias reports that they put together, they say that consumers want to travel more sustainably, and sustainably is a top priority for the corporate travel industry as well. Travelus works to deliver clear, consistent, and credible sustainability information at scale to enable people to make better travel choices. For example, the same flight emissions estimates are now available across the majority of Travelus partner platforms. The lower emitting flight is flagged, which empowers the person booking travel to select a flight with lower than average emissions, reducing the impact of their trip. Well, that sounds all wonderful, but being that Google is a partner of them, and back in 2022, they were called out and put on blast. Originally exposed by the BBC was that Google had been accused of airbrushing aviation emissions after the company changed its flight search engine to half the CO2 emissions attributed by any group. And in this report, Google was intentionally minimizing the reported environmental impact of flights because its calculations were not comprehensive and specifically did not include contrail impacts. All of these global companies have their own agenda and using this climate hoax as a front in order to do it, whether it be gain your data, to be able to track you, to measure you, and to be able to sell things to you so they can make money. This is what this is all about. So the bigger question that we have here is, how does Harry make money from all of this? As it says, it is a nonprofit company, which I'd like to raise the point that nonprofit versus charity are two separate meanings in the UK, as opposed to in the United States, not-for-profit and charity are the same thing in the tax code. So in the UK, a not-for-profit organization is a catch-all term for organizations that are, unsurprisingly, not-for-profit, meaning that their activities are not for financial benefit of any individual or board of directors. Fair and point. Here's the catch in what I see happening here. There's something truly fishy going on here. So, a little less than 2 weeks ago, Travelus had posted its annual list of accounts in which this director's reports state that the principal activity of Travelus is to promote global awareness of the importance of sustainable tourism by aligning the world's leading travel brands on how to report sustainability across their platforms in ways that help consumers make better decisions. On the surface, that's what this company is supposed to be doing. This company reeks of deceit because why would these large tech companies join together in a coalition under Harry's company if Harry wasn't getting a piece of the pie? Now, when you look at how they set this company up, it's listed as one, not for profit, and two, a small company. So, does anybody know the requirements to be called a small company? Let's take a look. So, in order to qualify to be a small company, you have to meet the criteria of 2 bullet points. So, either turnover of 10.2 million pounds or less, or 5.1 million or less on its balance sheet, and 50 employees or less. Well, Travelus lists only 6 employees, and on its balance sheet, it comes nowhere close to money that they're talking about. So, what are the benefits of being classified as a small company? Well, a main benefit here is that you can use the exemption to not be audited. I think that's a big one. But also, the company can send an abridged accounts to Company House, meaning a simpler balance sheet, doesn't have too many details on it, and less information for the public to see. Now, do we think that that is a route that Harry would go? Absolutely, if something nefarious was going on, which I suspect is happening here. Now, when you look at this balance sheet closer, you see a certain amount of money leaving. As you see, it's £439,000, so about $500,000 going to creditors. Now, the question is, who are the creditors? Well, I'll tell you in a second. Now, remember I told you that not-for-profit meant that there was no financial benefit of any individual or board of directors. So if we apply this logic here, that would mean none of the directors listed here made any kind of profit, but they're also the employees. So are they doing this for free? I highly doubt it. When we look at this list, notice the second person there, that's J.A. Holt, or James Holt, the CEO now of Archwell Public Charity in the United States. So we wonder, well, James Holt's salary bumped up 2 times as much as the rest of the employees. Could they be transferring funds over there? Also, one little detail that we should be aware of is on this abridged report, because it's a small company, wink, wink, it says here that it is a company limited by guarantee. So what exactly does that mean? Well, that means it does not have any shares or shareholders like the more common limited by share structure, but is owned by guarantors who agree to pay a set amount of money towards company debts. Well, hold on a second. It says it does not have any shares or shareholders? How could that be? When Harry is listed as the one with significant control of ownership of 75% or more of the shares. So does that mean that Harry is the guarantor? Kind of seems like it, doesn't it? So when you go back to this simplified balance sheet and you look at the line item that says creditors, amounts falling due within 1 year, it says £439,217, and you look at the notes that were listed there, notes 5 and 6, to try and make out who these people are, could it be? So if I understand this correctly, the trade debtors are the invoices owed to Travelus. So we see here £200,000, nice round number. Then when we look at the creditors, the amounts falling due within 1 year, we have £439,217, which ended up being negative, which is how much money the company Travelus owes to its creditors, which we're seeing a negative in this number, meaning that it was paid off. So could it be in order to pull that money from the account without having to pay taxes on, Harry is the one who is the guarantor, meaning that the money now that was lent out has now been paid back to one of Harry's 11 shell corporations that's now floating out into an offshore account. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but it just seems so suspicious that they're saying that they are a company limited by guarantees. So obviously there's someone helping support that. And Prince Harry has more than 75% ownership here, even though he's not listed on the list of directors. You have to think to yourself, something smells funky. And with this couple, knowing how deceitful and how manipulative they are, I'm sure they are swishing funds around. We've seen that with Archwell. We're seeing that. I mean, why would you open up 11 shell corporations unless you were trying to move money around from various different accounts? And I could honestly see that one of those companies that Harry has set up is dedicated to being a member of this travelers coalition, in which I'm sure is parking money somewhere. When you look at these big tech companies and they write a check to a not-for-profit, they can write that off as charity here in the United States. So everybody is avoiding to pay taxes. I think this is one big money scam. And in addition to it, they're saying that, oh, yeah, we're trying to make travel more sustainable. But as I pointed out to you, it's nothing but greenwashing, and it's all to get people's data and their business. When you look at the two biggest credit card companies that take transactions, you have to think, why are they doing this? Obviously, this is pushing towards this more centralized banking and tracking what people are spending, where they're spending it, and how they can make more money off of you or how they can restrict you. This is where we're going, folks. That's why I don't trust anything that Meghan and Harry touch, because they're on board with this globalist agenda that, quite frankly, needs to be called out and shut down. And when you look at the partnerships that are part of this coalition, they're mainly services that target a demographic that is cost conscious, meaning people who don't have ungodly amounts of money that are watching every single penny. And they are looking at those people like you and I in order to track, to monitor, to see what you're buying, in order to figure out how much more they can squeeze out of you or prevent you from doing. And I think that this is, telling of where we are as a society, because this is what these people are doing, especially when you have someone like Prince Harry who virtue signals and tells us what we need to be doing. This is the clear effort of what these globalists are trying to do with all of us, which is control our lives. Prince Harry and company have key actions that regular travelers like you and I need to be taking. Like this one, number 1, when choosing where to travel and taking into account your carbon footprint, consider destinations closer to home when you can. Number 2, when considering to get there, think about low-carbon transport options such as rail. And if flying is your only option, look for carbon emissions information when booking flights and prioritize those that have lower than average emissions. Number 3, seek out accommodation providers that have a sustainability certification that is on our list. And number 4, when you are in a destination, prioritize your spending on local businesses, respect local cultures, and consider staying for longer. These assholes really do infuriate me, because it's like the folks like you and I don't travel enough to make any kind of dent in the atmosphere with our carbon footprint. I'm sorry, but if I'm going to be going on vacation, which is something that I rarely do, I am not going to sacrifice or accommodate all because we have to save the planet. No, if I want to go halfway around the world, I'm going to do it. If I want to get there via plane, that's how I will go. Or if I want to drive in a gas-guzzling car, then that's my right. We all have one life to live. And the fact that they are virtue signaling when they themselves don't practice any of this, I don't want to hear it. I don't want anybody telling me where I can go, where I should stay, where I need to spend my money, as opposed to choosing how I spend my money. And I don't want anybody tracking me or my carbon footprint, and at the end of the day telling me that I'm over my credits, because this is where this is all going. So Harry and Meghan, you can go bugger off. I'm so sick of both of you. You mean to tell me anyone's going to listen to this jackass who, one, is flying private all over the place? Right there shows that he is a climate denier and saying that, yeah, I don't believe this garbage. Otherwise, if I did, I would be doing the exact same thing that I'm telling you to do. Make sense? Like, take for example, when Harry and Meghan went to Vegas to see Katy Perry, that jet that they flew on was funded with oil money. You see, Harry and Meghan love to lecture and scold us about how our lifestyles kill the planet. In addition to that, they shame us into changing our ways. This is what this travelist is doing, and yet they don't change their own ways. That private jet likely spewed more carbon in the air than you and I do over a full year. But Harry and Meghan don't care because they know that this is a sham and they are grifting off of it. Now, this next comment that I make is going to be directed towards the select few that love to put in my comment section that you don't like when I go down these conspiracy theory routes. I guess my first question is what makes this conspiracy when this is happening in real time in front of your face? I just want to understand, like, how am I making up something that is existing in reality? Are you living in an alternate reality? My guess is that you are and are listening to what the mainstream media is telling us. If that be the case, then you've learned nothing from what Harry and Meghan have taught us about elitist parasites who are using this climate change excuse as a backdoor method to push these fascist policies that we're seeing. It's a scare tactic based on lies and an easy way to sound virtuous without having to be virtuous. When you boil it down, it's bullying hidden in virtue, something that Meghan knows a lot about. I think we know by now that anything associated with these two is not what it seems on the surface, and you have to look deeper. And I'm saying that we need to do this as well with travelists, because something doesn't seem right. But what do you guys think? Do you understand this balance sheet that they left there? Where is this money going? How are they making money? Obviously, this is not being done for free. At bare minimum, there's a cost for that glossy looking website filled with all these kind and compassionate words that make you say, but not really mean anything.
A travelist, for us communities, is the people and the places, the landscapes, the ecosystems, the assets that belong to you, and the businesses, the cultures that make each place unique and ultimately a destination that the world.
There's valid reason as to why Prince Harry will not step down, and that's because of something called green colonialism. So earlier on in this video, we talked about greenwashing. Well, but then on the other side of the travelist business is made for the so-called corporations. Now, when you look at the things that Harry has been involved in, such as African parks, and why he's not speaking out, especially around the abuses of the indigenous people in order to force them out, you start to put two and two together as to how travelists will be making their money and what it's set up and designed to do.
And without the destinations, there is no business. So we understand that it is crucial that we strive to do better by the people and places that we collectively depend on. This is a powerful coalition of some of the biggest names in travel and technology. Not one entity can own sustainability. We need to work together to change the course and focus on how travel and tourism can bring prosperity to the whole entire system. Through the hard work and dedication of all of you here in this room, we're seeing firsthand the power of collaboration to make change happen.
Now, ever since this scandal had broke, I had been putting a little more time into researching about Harry and Meghan's interests in Africa. As we've seen last year, Meghan's interest in claiming that she's 43% Nigerian, and all of a sudden now her investment in giving period pads to kids in Africa. And then also the UN's interest in transforming Africa for this Agenda 2063. Now, I had presented some information around it showing you that it almost feels like we have these billionaires going onto the land trying to force the indigenous people off in order to pillage the land for its wonderful resources instead of giving it back to the people. Now, the UN SDG goals claiming to try and solve hunger as well as poverty by 2030 almost feels like a farce because it appears that the poor keep getting poorer and the rich keep getting richer. There doesn't seem to be any sort of gap that is closing. In fact, the gap is widening as a result. So as I look into this and reading about this scandal, you start to put things together to figure out what is the real agenda here. And I stumbled upon this article back in the year of 2022, comes from witnessradio.org, which is a nonpartisan and not-for-profit registered network of human rights investigative journalists, lawyers, social workers using legal aid support, and media leading approaches with a main focus to promote and protect economic, social, and cultural rights and development in Uganda. And this organization did a write up and expose around what has been going on with African parks. And this is what we're going to get into. Conservation concessions as neo colonization, the African Parks Network. The conservation industry is now promoting the idea of buying up conservation concessions and reconstituting them as business models with profit seeking aims. A case in point is the African Parks Network, which manages 19 national parks and protected areas in 11 countries in Africa. Now, just when you think you couldn't despise Meghan and Harry anymore, they always find a way to surprise you. After I go through this, you're going to realize how evil and disgusting these globalists and billionaires are to be doing this, especially when you look at how the travelist model is set up and Harry being quite silent around the abuses that are happening with the Baka people. The article begins by saying, concessions for so-called conservation purposes, national parks, protected areas, nature reserves, etc., have their roots in the ideas and beliefs that underpinned European colonization. The concept of protected areas originated in the United States in the late 1800s, founded on the desire to preserve intact areas of wilderness without human presence, mainly for elite hunting and the enjoyment of scenic beauty. Both Yellowstone and Yosemite National Parks were forcibly emptied of their inhabitants and provided the blueprint for doing conservation that continues to the present day. During that same period, European colonizers declared large tracts of the occupied territories in Africa as game reserves after forcibly displacing populations from said areas. These reserves were often created after colonialist hunters had already exterminated much of the wildlife population in an effort to restore such populations so that they could continue big game hunting. However, the withdrawal of European colonizers from Africa did not bring about a return to customary land tenure. Newly formed states often continued the land use and conservation policies of the colonizers, which demonstrates how deep colonial norms and knowledge systems had become institutionalized. Colonization processes have always been accompanied by the idea that nature is separate from humans and that civilization is better than the unpredictable and unproductive wilderness. The idea of creating areas of nature without humans is thus rooted in the racist and colonial thinking that only white, civilized men were able to protect and manage this nature. They, and only they, could enter this otherwise human-free nature. And we can observe that in many places. This idea persists even today. Safari tourism, for example, is simply a continuation of this tradition. Wealthy, predominantly white tourists are paying large sums of money to stay in luxury hotels and receive permission to shoot animals with guns or cameras as trophies. Meanwhile, those populations that hunt for subsistence inside their territories turned park are labeled as poachers and criminalized. Such tourism relies on certain constructions of what Africa means to those undertaking the safaris, which can reveal the colonial mindset that created these reserves in the first place. That is why protected areas are mostly people-free landscapes. People are rarely portrayed as an intrinsic part of nature, and if they are depicted either as intruders or poachers or as touristic landscapes for buying handcrafts or watching dances, or as guides or eco guards working for a foreign company or NGO. Most international conservation NGOs have facilitated this depiction of indigenous peoples as invaders in their own territories. This narrative has conveniently placed their focus on fighting against people using the forest for their own subsistence instead of on the consumption patterns and economic interests of the supporters and funders of said NGOs. The Serengeti National Park of Tanzania, for example, is arguably the best known symbol of Africa's wild nature. Yet, there's hardly any mention in the park's tourist propaganda on how the Serengeti was created. By evicting the indigenous Maasai during colonial times from their ancestral territories. And this situation continues today. Mordecai Ogata, co-author of the book The Big Conservation Lie, explains in a 2021 interview that the geographical spaces of protected areas frequently work as colonies, with the difference that they are no longer under the management of an empire, but a network of elites with clear economic and political interests. Those, he explained, are the colonizers with respect to conservation concessions. They enter such agreements with large sums of money and frequently influence any national policy that might impact their interests and managed areas. The power of these networks of colonizers is both physical, enforcing their rule and dominance on the ground, and political, having allies in the right places administering key governmental offices and funding positions. On top of this, possible conflicts that may arise are easily brushed aside as not their responsibility. This is done by placing the burden on the sovereign condition of national governments. These networks answer to donors, the tourist industry, and tourists themselves, which are all mainly based in the global north. And they endure on the basis of images of peaceful landscapes, which in their imaginations are landscapes without people. These networks also involve powerful business people with vested interests in financing conservation for offsetting their emissions or greenwashing their dirty and destructive activities. Recent examples include the internet retailer Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos and his $10 billion Earth Fund, with some of the biggest conservation NGOs receiving $100 million each in a first round of payments, and Swiss billionaire businessman Hans-Jörg Weiss donations to the so-called 30 by 30 scheme, which aims for 30% of the planet to be turned into protected areas by 2030. Nowadays, the conservation industry is promoting the idea of buying up conservation concessions, protected areas or parks, and reconstituting them as business models with profit-seeking aims. A case in point is the African Parks Network, which manages 19 national parks and protected areas in 11 countries in Africa. The African Parks Network, outsourcing protected areas to private companies. The African Parks Network, APN, was founded by billionaire Dutch tycoon Paul Ventener in the year 2000. Its founding name was the African Parks Foundation. Ventener comes from one of the Netherlands' richest industrial dynasties and was CEO of the energy conglomerate SHV Holdings, which undertook business with the apartheid regime in South Africa. He allegedly had the idea for creating African parks after a dinner hosted by Nelson Mandela in the presence of Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, at which the future of national parks in South Africa was discussed. For the billionaire, it was the perfect opportunity to restore his image, tainted by his activities during the apartheid regime. Initially created as a commercial company, African Parks swapped this status for that of an NGO in 2005 in order to more easily attract donors and conservation funding. APN's business model is based on a public-private partnership (PPP) strategy for the management of protected areas, whereby APN maintains the full responsibility and execution of all management functions and is accountable to the government. APN employs a market approach to wildlife conservation, arguing that wildlife can pay for its conservation if well managed. It presents itself as an African solution for Africa's conservation challenges. However, behind the facade of APN is a large group of northern and southern governments, multilateral institutions, international conservation organizations, millionaire family foundations, and individuals that fund its conservation business. Since 2017, the president of the company is Prince Henry of Wales, otherwise known as Prince Harry, a member of the British royal family, who has helped in the acquisition of funding and partners. So, just so you know, this article was written in 2022 before Harry crossed over onto the executive board of directors. Anyhow, APN controls a total area of 14.7 million hectares in Africa, about half the size of Italy, and it intends to expand even more in order to manage 30 parks by 2030 across 11 biomes, ensuring that 30 million hectares are well managed, thus contributing to the broader vision of having 30% of Africa's unique landscapes protected in perpetuity. Moreover, their roadmap to 2030 states that 10 more protected areas spanning a further 5 million hectares will be managed by select partners through our newly created incubator program. These objectives are ambitious and will contribute significantly to the global target of protecting 30% of the Earth to keep the planet flourishing. The network also indicates its interest in selling carbon credits as an additional source of income. Although such credits basically facilitate more pollution and fossil fuel burning, the website of APN claims that its conservation model represents an integrated nature-based solution to climate change. We secure the carbon captured in the plants and soil in places of high biodiversity value. However, experiences on the ground reveal how this so-called public-private partnership is in fact reinforcing and recreating oppressive power relations. A 2016 academic study on the Mjedi Wildlife Reserve in Malawi is a case in point. The reserve has been managed by APN since 2003 with a 25-year management concession. It was the first park to fall under APN's administration. According to the concession they were granted, APN is supposed to involve community members in the management of the reserve. This includes consulting them in issues requiring critical decisions, such as bringing new animals into the area and allowing said members to access and use some of the resources in the reserve, such as grass, fish, and reeds. While there is a formal and legal partnership between the Malawian government and African Parks Network on the sharing of proceeds, there is no formal or clear agreement between local communities and African Parks Network on how benefits are going to be shared out. The benefits for the communities are only indirect, by engaging in activities such as selling food and performing dances for a tourist public. African Parks Network argues that apart from physically accessing the resources from the game reserve, communities will benefit from wildlife conservation through employment, income-generating activities they're engaged in, and via APN's corporate responsibility initiatives. However, according to the research, communities are rarely allowed to fish or to harvest honey or reeds in the game reserve. Instead, they are allowed to harvest only grass at specific times a year, with the park management putting forth the argument that communities are supposed to protect and conserve these areas, and that such harvesting disturbs the animals.
And without the stories, the connection, and the safeguarding that you provide, the world has no destinations to visit. And without the destinations, there is no business. So we understand that it is crucial that we strive to do better by the people and places that we collectively depend on.
One woman interviewed for the research was reported as saying, "We have lost control over our means of livelihood, but cannot also get employed by African Parks Network. We are prevented from accessing resources that we need for our daily subsistence life, such as fish, mushrooms, and honey." The same research also underlines how African Parks Network deceptively use local people to achieve its own goals, but in such a way as to be of no benefit to the community as a whole. For example, African Parks Network used a vague agreement with local chiefs who were taken to other national parks for a tour as justification to enforce an extension of the wildlife reserve to ancestral land that was being farmed by the communities. This left community members not only voiceless but also divided. This situation has been worsened even more by APN's tactic to coerce families, and women in particular, by offering to cover their children's school fees. Interviews with local chiefs and leaders of community organizations also revealed that though they are informed about the new developments inside the reserve, they do not have any powers to object to APN's management decisions. Consequently, they are forced to align themselves with the APN management for fear of jeopardizing their relationship with the organization. The Ojalakokoa National Park in the Republic of Congo is another case that merits being highlighted. The park, created in 1935 when the country was a French colony, appropriated the biggest forest area in the region, with 1.35 million hectares. Since 2010, the management of this nirvana for nature lovers, as African Parks Network describes it, has been placed entirely in African Parks Network's hands for a period of 25 years. The partners of the park include groups such as WWF and the European Union. African Parks Network partnered with the Congo Conservation Company, CCC, an enterprise created and funded by a German philanthropist in order to undertake tourist business activities in the Ojalakokoa National Park. This includes 3 high-end lodges, which tourists can access by flying in on charter flights from the Congolese capital, Brazzaville. However, very few inhabitants of Brazzaville have the possibility to enjoy such luxury tourism. A 4-day Ozala Gorilla Discovery Camp visit, for example, costs $9,690 per person. While the park was founded in 1935, African Parks Network states that humans have occupied the area for 50,000 years. The company notes that 12,000 people still live around the park, yet it is still one of the most biologically diverse and species-rich areas on the planet, emphasis added. With this formulation, rather than recognizing the inhabitants' contribution towards keeping the forest standing after all these thousands of years, the company makes it clear that in its view, the presence of people is not compatible with the aim of conserving forests. It is despite the community's presence that there is still some remaining biodiversity. African Parks Network claims to protect the park with an enhanced Eco Guard team and other law enforcement techniques, besides investing in changing human behavior. These claims and views on conservation make clear that for this network and its funders and allies, people living in and around forests are considered a threat, and that their conservation business can be better run without them. It should be no surprise that for more than 10 years, African Parks Network has shown an interest in exploring if the Ojalakokoa Park could be turned into a red project, because through the lens of such projects, communities are also considered a threat and blamed for deforestation. Furthermore, there are no provisions for communities to receive a share of the profits from the sale of carbon credits.
At Travelist, for us, communities is the people and the places, the landscapes, the ecosystems, the assets that belong to you, and the businesses, the cultures that make each place unique and ultimately a destination that the world wants to visit. This is a powerful coalition of some of the biggest names in travel and technology. Not one entity can own sustainability. We need to work together to change the course and focus on how travel and tourism can bring prosperity to the whole entire system.
So now do you all see how this all fits together? What Harry is doing is supporting this new type of colonialism. In my humble opinion, I think he's no better than back in the day when his ancestors had colonized, different parts of land as well as enslaved people. Harry, in my humble opinion, has this so-called unconscious bias, but I do think it is conscious. I do think he is racist, and I do think that he sees himself superior to everybody else. And what he is doing here in essentially forcing or participating in being a part of an organization that is forcing people from their native lands in order to profit just shows exactly who Meghan and Harry are. They don't care about people. They care about exploiting people and making money from it. In my humble opinion, I do think that Travelers will integrate with African parks. It just makes sense to do so. And I believe that he set this organization up to profit from this whole setup with this African Parks network. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you think that Travelers does align with African Parks Network and what is happening is so wrong and gross? Or do you think they're not connected? But definitely let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe and I will talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.